This week, we feature someone who has grown up and dealt with many terrifying paranormal experiences. These experiences have touched him so deeply that he wrote a book about it. Author of the next chapter, After the Park Road Hauntings, a memoir based on terrifying true paranormal events. I'd like to welcome Andrew Hopkins to the show.
Thank you for having me, Dylan. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
yeah, man. I appreciate you taking the time to do this. Where are you joining us from today?
I'm from Leicestershire in England, the UK. It's a sunny 28 degrees Celsius here today. We're in the middle of a bit of a heat wave. It's beautiful, I tell you.
That's awesome, man. And thanks for, like I said, thanks for taking the time out to do this. First off, just I'd like to say to everyone that's listening, I mean, if you guys enjoy spooky stories, the book I believe is a must read. It really does a nice job at sucking you in, as a reader. um it does a nice job at, like, filling in a lot of the details and kind of putting you in the moment, which I really enjoyed as a reader, just being able to enjoy, like, it kind of just puts me there in the spot and makes it, I think, that much more kind of creepy or scary. So you do a nice job with that. What's some of your background? I mean, do you have a background in writing?
I've always wanted to write. I mean, ever since I was kind of in primary school, I used to retell stories from movies that I watched. I remember seeing Jurassic Park and then going home and just penning out all the whole scenes and just kind of really putting myself in there. And uh, I've uh, I've wanted to write a story or write my experiences down for some time because the paranormal back when I was younger was so much of a taboo subject. If you even mentioned hearing something or seeing something, you were sent to a doctor, and they were sort of, they'd question you, and they'd think that you were you were going a little bit cuckoo. But so I've always wanted to write something to give people that view that you're not crazy. But when about sort of 3 or 4 years ago now, I started a degree as well in English literature because I've always wanted to get my story out there. And after meeting my publisher, who's a client of mine as well, he gave me this. But he's been saying for kind of a couple of years, write me a book. We write them down for you. We write them down, and I've just during COVID, I've had that time to really focus on it, and I truly appreciate the compliments, man. The saying that you were there with me, because that's really what I wanted to do. I didn't want to put a load of fluff in the story. I wanted just to say how I felt. And as a kid, I mean, even thinking about it now, I get goosebumps. And I just wanted to portray how I felt back then. And you and other people I've spoken to have all kind of mirrored that you've felt that. So honestly, from my heart, I appreciate that. I truly do.
Yeah, no problem, man. I mean, it's true. I mean, I'm not, I'm not sugarcoating anything. I
Yeah.
think what you've put together is legit. And that's, I guess, my next question is there anything else? Is there, like, going to be future things? Because I think you definitely got some talent, man. And I feel like we'd be missing out if what what
Well, yeah.
what do you
I've
have planned?
we've got the first two books out. That was my flagship book, came out on Valentine's Day. So that was I never expected sort of 200 people to buy it, yet we're selling pretty well. And it got bestseller in a couple of categories in the UK, which is just pushing me to do more and more. And I'm currently in the process of writing a novella, sort of a short 5,000 word story that's going out on a couple of platforms soon. I'm also writing something for Halloween, which is again pretty much all the cases that I've worked on throughout, sort of after leaving Park Road and developing myself. Some truly kind of nasty energies that I've faced throughout my life. Because one of the big and one of my favorite parts of my job is investigating private residences, people's houses. People message me quite often and they're saying, right, well, this is what's happening. And I love to get involved in that. I love to try and help people realize that they're not crazy and realize that there is something there if there is. Do you know what I mean? And I think that that's one of the big pulls for me. with writing what I've done and where I've been, because it's just giving people some that confidence to speak out, if you understand me.
Yeah, and that's something I do want to touch on here in a little bit. I did, from reading, I really appreciate, and I got a kick out of the fact that it seems like you do have some psychic abilities, and you talk
Mhm.
about that. Um, Maybe before we touch on that, though, can without maybe giving away too many of the details of your book, can we get maybe for the listeners some backstory to kind of what you went through and
Yeah.
kind of how it all started?
Yeah, of course. Well, I grew up sort of in the 80s, and I lived with my mum and my dad split up. So I moved with my mum and my brother and my sister to this new house. And literally, it was just a mid-terraced house. So, houses on either side. It's an old house in an old coal mining town in Leicestershire in England. And there was nothing kind of really spooky and ominous about it. It was just a house in the middle of a street. And I remember walking into that house and everything seemed huge. The ceilings were high. The entranceway onto the side of the house just looked like this giant mouth. It seemed like this something was just going to kind of swallow you up. But it had those kind of vibes to me, and I didn't quite understand it. And not long after I moved in there, I remember waking up one morning. I was freezing cold, and it was the middle of the summer, and I was freezing cold, and it must have been about 3:30 in the morning, and I was just drawn. I was sort of I opened my eyes, and I was just drawn to this certain point in my room, and there was a lady standing there, and I was like, oh. Okay, so she was glowing. She looked lovely. She didn't scare me. She looked lovely. And I just sort of remember looking at her, and in my mind, I was thinking, why is there a lady in my room? And she didn't scare me. I felt quite nice, and she made me laugh actually, because she just smiled at me, and she just reminded me of a grandma. And so the next day, I told my mum. Well, I asked my mum. I said, "Who was that lady in my room last night?" And my mum sort of looked at me as if I'd just sort of slapped her or something. She went, "Well, what lady?" And I went, "The lady in my room." And she was like, "Well, you were dreaming. There was nobody in your room." And I said, "Well, I know when I'm dreaming." And a couple of days later, she shows me this newspaper clipping of this lady, and she was there was like a birthday cake, and it was like a really nice looking scene. I said, "That's the lady I saw. What was she doing in my room?" And she went, "Well, she couldn't have been because she died." And I was like, "Oh." And it was kind of, as when you're younger, I mean, I'm sure people can relate. When you're younger, you don't really label things. You don't really think that shouldn't exist, or that's silly. You just sort of say it as it is, don't you? You see things, and you say what it is. Um, but from there, sort of, that was one of the nicest experiences I had at Potter Road, the first one as well. But after then, I think this was almost like a warning that how I like to see it is this lady was saying there's some stuff going to go down, and just remember that not all spirits are bad, not all ghosts are bad. And after that, it was like almost like a darkness came over the house, and we had a spirit that we called George, and he did some horrible things. He interacted with our energy because my mum was going through a bit of a rough time, and the house was, it was kind of hard life at the beginning there. And this spirit seemed to feed on that energy, and it did what it could to scare me. One of the first times I remember, I was put to bed before my brother and my sister, and the landing light was on, the hallway light, and was shining in, and all of a sudden I'm hearing footsteps walking towards my door, and I was thinking, brilliant, because it's my brother or my sister coming to bed. And then the shadow just creeps through the door, and it goes onto the wall, and it's like a solid mass shadow. It goes towards the curtains. The curtains billow out, and this thing is just in my mind. I'm thinking, that's not right. That isn't right. And I could close my eyes and I'd open them. It'd still be there. And the more scared I was, the more it fed on that. And because I was psychically aware, spiritually open, or however you want to call it, it seemed to use me more of a battery. So the more fearful I got, the, the more scary this thing got. Um, and I remember, I always say to people that spirit interact with energy. You know, if you're in a really good mood, you tend to attract good energy. If you're in a really crappy mood, you tend to get negative things happen. And after a sort of a little while, my mum met a new guy, and he was a little bit of a scumbag, to be quite honest. He was a real sleazeball. He was a lot older than my mum, and one night they'd gone out to the pub, and my mum came in crying. I was in bed, well, I was in my bedroom, and I could hear her crying. And all of a sudden, there's this hammering on the wall, on the front door, and it was actually my mum's boyfriend threatening to kill us all. And as soon as that was starting happening, I kind of opened the curtain to peer down at the front door to see him, and I looked up, and there was literally a reflection of a man standing behind me near my bed, and I turned around. He wasn't there, but I looked back and he was there. Then my bed starts to shake. All this time, it was just. It sounds like something out of a horror movie. I know, but this stuff is real. This energy was feeding off the nastiness that was happening. I cowered in my bed, and I was pulled out of my bed by this thing, and I couldn't move. And it wasn't just through fear that I couldn't move. This thing was holding me down. And as I was being held down, I saw, it was possibly one of the first times that I'd ever clairvoyantly seen something. And when this thing was over me, I saw hands in front of my face, in front of my, as a point of, as kind of a person view. And these weren't my hands, there was somebody else. There was dirt, and I could smell the earth. And it was just the worse I got, the worse it got. So that's possibly one of the worst things that happened there. And
That's terrifying.
it even affected my family, though, because my mum could hear me, or could hear the kerfuffle that was happening in my room. She came running upstairs, and all of a sudden she was knocked on the floor. I could move, she couldn't, and I was panicking. And the very first time I ever stood up to a spirit, and I screamed, I shouted, "No!" And all of a sudden my mum could move again, and the energy had lifted, and this thing had just gone. But even thinking about it now, it's quite fun. Do you know when you have something extreme happen, and you're telling the story, and you think, this is something that should be on Netflix? Do you know what I mean? But
Right.
it's true. It's unreal what you can experience in the wrong kind of energy. And that wasn't all, though. We had so much happen there. We had after we never saw the guy that was threatening us. After that, again, we never saw him. We sent the police after him and whatnot, but he just got a warning.
Now,
But
your mom's boyfriend, I gathered from reading, though, the energy in the house changed when he was there, or
yeah,
it drew on his negative energy.
yeah, absolutely. Because when he left, things started to ease a little bit. I remember when we were talking to the police downstairs, and the police dog was there, and we were loving this dog. But after that, my mum just pulled out the ice cream out the freezer, and we just sat there laughing. It was the first time I remember laughing for so long, because things felt so oppressive,
That's
and things
cool.
felt so nasty. But after that, things started to ease a little bit more.
Mm.
Um, they didn't go away, but they eased a little bit more. So yeah, I mean, this
Now,
spirit energy, this George, who what we called him, he was he didn't care about kind of upsetting us. He wanted that, and anything that could give him power, he took it.
that's
You know.
interesting. Now, the I got a couple questions, but
Mm-hmm.
the when you were a child, was it validating to you that when you realized that you know that lady actually existed at one time? And is that when you kind of first noticed that you had some kind of different abilities that other people don't have?
Well, I was confused because I didn't know any different. I didn't expect my mum to say, "Well, you couldn't have seen that," because I know all through my life I can do lucid dreaming, and I've always been able to kind of know when I'm awake and when I'm not. And it left me confused, and it kind of, I remember when I'd hear things, when we'd hear taps upstairs, or walking along the landing, or I'd see something out of the corner of my eye. I always thought, well, I know it's there, but then my brother, who was very scared of these sort of things, he still is today, and my sister, who is again quite frightful of it, they always sort of blamed something else. But my mum knew that I knew, so it was nice. Yes, it did kind of make me feel a little bit special, to be quite honest. I could see something that they're saying that it's not there, but I knew it was. So yeah, it did make me feel special. It didn't. It wasn't until I kind of grew up a little bit more and read a little bit more about other people's experiences that I realized. I thought, well, hang on, I'm doing this. This is what I can see. So yeah, I think the more things that happened, even though they were scary, the more I kind of craved them to happen because it was giving me validation. Sorry, I can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Your experience was really quite different than your siblings and your mom, right?
Yeah, my mum, she's always been quite open. It's quite funny. She comes on ghost hunts with me today. She comes on events with me, and she loves it. But yeah, my mum back then, she was trying to hold everything together because obviously the split between my mum and my dad, that kind of threw her into turmoil. She was now caring for 3 kids while trying to work and then when all this stuff starts happening, she is trying to hold everything down rather than, and although she'd say to me, oh, it's just this or it's just that, I knew that she didn't believe that. She'd even joke sometimes about having a seance or something with me, and my sister would sort of look at her, gone out. But my sister is still to this day scared of spirit, and scared of ghosts. She felt things in that house that she didn't tell everybody and she didn't talk about much. I remember if she saw, the night before my mum's wedding, she saw a pair of eyes staring at her in the bedroom, and after she that it freaked her out so much that she just wouldn't talk about it, wouldn't acknowledge it. My brother, he'd always blame me for the things happening. For example, one night his room was trashed by George, and they were out at the pub because he's 7 years older than me, so he went out to the pub with my mum. And I remember he came home and he shouted me, and I went, what? And his room was trashed, and he'd blame me. My mum would sort of look at me, see how serious I was being, and she'd just try and pan over it. She wouldn't blame me, but she wouldn't say, yes, yes, yeah, it was a ghost that did this. So yeah, we all. I always joke that I'm the black sheep of the family. I'm the adopted one, But yeah, it's weird that how people can grow up in such close quarters and experience things so different. My brother did experience certain things, and he spent a lot of time out of the house when things sort of got bad.
That's interesting. And I mean, obviously, a lot of it had to do with the actual location itself, too.
Yeah,
Now, based on your experience, from it sounds to me like you still do a lot of work as far as dealing with spirits and stuff. But based on your experience, I mean, do particular locations are more of like hot spots, and it almost seems as though in some cases though like houses themselves have their own personality. I
yeah.
mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think when it comes to the house on Park Road, it was not only the energy that was in the house, sort of. I think that this spirit would have lived there, and I feel that he had interactions with that property. Um, but there are things like natural energy centers, natural energy lines that run under the earth. Colville's an old mining town. The whole place is littered with shafts and tunnels underground, and that interacts with the natural flow of the earth as well. So I feel that in a way, meddling around under the ground with the mines and stuff kind of created portals, so to speak. Funnily enough, when I released the first book, um, it kind of went a little bit viral around the spotted sites and, you know, the Facebook groups and stuff around town. So I only live about 20 minutes from there now. And on a history page, somebody got my details and they messaged me saying, well, funnily enough, my great granddad used to work in planning, and he used to say that apparently this person said that where the houses were on Park Road was actually where the graveyard was for an old chapel. And I always said, I only found this out after I'd written the book, which to me, I was like, wow, mind blown. But I said to, when my publisher was asking me what I felt, what I thought that was to do with this, I always said that I think this guy was a grave robber, or he had something to do with the church down the road. And because the images that I'd see when we'd interact, when he'd kind of get too close, and when my energy would let him, you know, I saw the earth so much, and I saw dirty hands in front of me, and the smell of like wet dirt, and how it sounded and how it felt. And to have this person then message me saying, well, yeah, because that used to be
is creepy.
and that, it's, yeah.
It's giving me the chills, man. That's the detail though. I mean, the smell that you even picked up on scents, and you know, that's wow.
I think the thing is, depending on what sort of spirit you interact with, because obviously I give spiritual readings near enough every day of the week, because that's my job. And depending on the spirit, depends on how they'll interact. Sometimes I'll just see little pictures, little snippets. Sometimes it'll be songs, or I'll hear a voice, and sometimes I'll smell certain things, and it can be those little points, those little details that make the most sense to the people you read for, if you get me.
Yeah, I do. Them shadow creatures that you experienced in that house, was that George, or was that something a little more sinister?
No, you see, I think George was I do believe he was a person. You know, he wasn't something demonic. I think he was a person, but I feel that the energy that flowed through the house, I feel that the energy that some people would say a portal, gave him more strength. Because I've been doing this all my life now, like all my adult life, I've been investigating the paranormal. You know, I'm 37 now. And it's so rare that I come across something as strong as he was. And it's only when something something really nasty has happened on the premises, or something like really evil's happened on that premises, that where things get that kind of energy. So I do feel that those shadows were George. It all felt like the same energy, but it gained more strength, and as it gains more strength, it gained more power. Like, I don't feel that back when I first moved in there, he wouldn't have had that strength to pull me out of bed like he did when my mum's boyfriend was threatening us all. But I think that if things carried on, I'd love to get back in the house. I really would. I think if things carried on, then it would get more angry, more aggressive, more strong, and it could draw in the more kind of demonic energy.
Now, your experience, you know, throughout your investigations in your career, I'm sure you've come across other shadow forms. Are they typically just spirits that can kind of manifest in that way, or is there something more sinister? Because I've heard a lot of, you know, kind of horror stories about like shadow people and things like that.
Yeah. I think shadow people, my opinion of shadow people, it's almost like, for example, I did an investigation at a nuclear bomb shelter. It's an abandoned, it's called Drakelow Tunnels. If you Google it, you'll see how vast and scary this place is.
That's cool.
One of my favorite places to investigate, actually. But there are so many sightings of shadows and shadow people, and it's such a vast kind of place. It's hard in a place like Drakelow to see a shadow person because it's pitch black, but you can still see them. In my opinion, it is almost like a manifestation of different energies, different people, and it's almost taking form as a shadow because it wants the attention, it wants to almost conform, it wants to show itself to relate to us in some way. I feel that most of the time that's what shadow people are. They're almost like just a manifestation, certain energies wanting to interact, and they're using what we give them to take form. So if somebody is, if these certain energies that are manifesting are more negative, or they're feeding off negative things that have happened, then they manifest as a scarier kind of shadow, or they'll move differently, or they'll try to interact with us differently. But I think it can be a whole host of different things. But I found in my experience that it is more a manifestation of different energies taking that form to interact with us.
That's fascinating. And have you ever, I mean, you probably have, but have you ever thought on the fact that really that experience at that house kind of shaped and molded the direction of your career path and really a lot of who you are?
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost, I mean, obviously you have to have that kind of ability in the first place, but it's almost as if it's quite the synchronicity, don't you think?
Yeah, I I think things happen for a reason. I remember my earliest career plan was to be an actor. I really fancied myself doing action movies. I used to love Indiana Jones. I could see myself being the next Harrison Ford. But I think the more that happened to me, the more I used to think, um, like, this has got to be happening for a reason. I went through a lot of different belief structures when I was younger. Is this God showing me the way? Is this the universe? Is it just me? Am I crazy? And I think what I'm comfortable with now is there is a universal being somewhere. There is the universe, there is an energy, and it is guiding me down this way because I am meant to do it. And I remember the very first spiritual reading I gave, and I'd joined this little circle of people. I'd never met them before in my life, and I'd never really formed a message before. I said to this lady, okay, so I think there's a man with you. And just in my head, I could just picture, it was like almost like sticking different body parts and sticking different bits in front of me. And I just made this picture of this man, and I described him, and I explained that I felt confused and I felt sick, and there was tightening in my chest, and I'd described this lady's granddad, and she cried. And afterwards she came outside to me when I was talking to some of the smokers, and she said that means so much to me. And that was the moment I thought, right, so I've helped her and I want to help more. And the more you do, the more it gets addictive, it really does. Not only the spiritual readings, because I love seeing people's faces when you connect to somebody, and when they're relaying messages and guidance to them that really means something to them. It's a wonder to me. It truly is. And then even on a paranormal level, I'm always after more evidence. I'd find myself after Park Road just wandering off to places, just exploring them. And I snuck into an abandoned asylum one day, and that freaked the hell out of me. But it's just addictive. And I think that who doesn't want to enjoy their job? Who doesn't want to enjoy their life's purpose?
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, I think a lot of what, people like yourself do, I mean, it's really healing. At least I know personally, I've had that experience of being healed through psychic mediumship. I mean,
Yeah.
it can really help people get over the loss of a loved one. It can help with grief. It can just help give hope for, that we
Yeah.
continue on, past the physical. So I think what you're doing is great work. It's light work, man. It's healing stuff that we need people like you. So it's a great thing, man. It's a great thing. What is one of your more um crazier experiences in your investigations, or something that like maybe you'll never forget that just kind of even shocked you a little bit?
Okay, yeah. One off. If you, I don't know if you have heard of Alton Towers over there in the States, but Alton Towers it's a theme park over here, And it's built around this massive old castle. It's all in ruins now, but we hired it out for a paranormal investigation, and I was working with the company, and I was one of the mediums that were floating between the groups. So I didn't have a group of guests on my own. I just went between them, and I was just walking down this one part. I'd just come out of this door, and there's this tunnel. I was just looking at it, and I thought, oh, I don't like it. I didn't know, but because I was testing myself, I started to walk down there, and there was this shadow, and it looked like a hooded figure just on the side of the tunnel. And I thought, something's casting that shadow. It's got to be, because we always try and debunk things. And so I walked a little bit closer, and then the shadow just came off the wall and started walking towards me. And that's when your sort of human fear starts kicking in, and you're like, okay, let's walk backwards, run, And I ran back inside, and sort of started to compose myself again. And there's this big wooden staircase that leads up to like all the other layers in the castle. And I remember going up there, and I was talking to a group of guests, and I came back down, and I could hear stomping behind me coming down the stairs, and there was nobody there. So I was leaping down the stairs, and I got to the bottom of the stairwell, and I thought, right, come on, compose yourself. And somebody whispered as clear as day in my ear, die. And I went straight running. Didn't know where I was going, but I ran straight into a group of guests, and they were laughing their heads off at me. But yeah, that's one of the strongest audio phenomenon I've ever heard. And about a week after that, actually, we were in a pub in San Diego, which is sort of a little way from here. And have you ever heard of a Frank's box?
No, what is that? It might be, is it like a spirit box?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
Like the little AM radio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Well, I'm pretty skeptical on some equipment. It's like these apps that speak random words to you. I'm pretty skeptical on them. But first time I'd used one of these spirit boxes, and we were sitting in this cellar, and I said, "Come on then, if you're here, tell me you're here." And it said hello, and I said, "Okay, then if you're here, say my name." And it said Andy. So I thought, "Oh, okay." I said, "All right, say each of our names in turn," and it did. And I went, "Oh,
Oh man.
okay." And then I turned it off, and I went, "See, it's not smart enough just to speak to us now." And literally everybody heard hello. And I stood up in this cellar that's about this tall. Oh God. Yes. I love how surprising it is, and I love to be scared because it means something's actually happened. You know what I mean? I've done thousands of investigations, and I must say, like the odd little taps or the odd cold spot doesn't really do it for me anymore. I need something concrete, you know.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. Now, do you usually use like instruments and stuff? Because you talk about using the spirit box. I mean, do you do like EVP work and stuff like that as well, or are the other team members maybe that you're on an investigation with do stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, back when I started ghost hunting, before it became popular, before I used to just love using my own senses. I used to love getting people involved using their own senses, using the crystal pendulums, the dowsing rods, that kind of thing. When I was first starting, EMF meters and K2 meters were brand new, and they were about 60 quid at the time. But I've got in my team at the moment, I've got a guy called Paul, and he's literally got thousands of pounds worth of equipment like REM pods, and he's got different motion sensors. He's literally just paid about £70 for this motion detector. It looks like a coffin, but if you break the beam, it plays Ghostbusters. I like those things. I'm more inclined to like motion detectors and REM pods rather than a K2 meter, because like many things, you get something new and it's brilliant and it works, but then people find ways of cheating it. I mean, a K2 meter goes off with your mobile phone, even if it's on airplane mode sometimes, and I like to have evidence. Like you went on about EVPs, loving EVP, absolutely. But I let other people do that bit. I let my tech guy Paul, the tech guy, do that, and I let people fanny around with that sort of stuff. And I like to enhance people's own gifts rather than relying on them.
Now, when you do go to a location, is it is it similar to some of the experiences you had at the house, like where you're actually picking up on the history of the location, or maybe people that have, you know, used to be there or live there?
Yeah, I mean, depends on where you go. I mean, I went to a place called the Skirrid Inn, which is in Wales. Um, it's a good drive through the valleys to get there, to be quite fair. About 3 hours from me, and I don't like to research history before I go to a place because I think it kind of sways you a little bit, and your conscious mind puts things together.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I went to the Skirrid Inn, and there's one room I couldn't settle, and I kept feeling somebody breathing down the back of my neck, and I was only with the team at this point. And I said, I've got this man here, and I said he did awful things here, but I don't like just saying something vague. And I literally just said, I just saw this man just slamming his hand down on this bench and just putting this person to death, that person to death, that person, and it was almost like I felt he was a judge of some kind. And it turns out from the history of the place that that's exactly who he was. You know, he put so many people to death on the hanging post at the top of the stairwell, which is still there. So I love it when I get verifications for things on events like that. I truly do. And whether, even if it's not a name of a person, you know, if I get what a spirit is telling me and the evidence from that, I'm buzzing. I really am.
That's fascinating stuff, man. And I always think of you know, the area of the world that you live in too. I mean, it's got such a rich and deep history
Yeah.
that goes way farther back than, you know, say somewhere in the States, which
Yeah.
is fascinating. That's so cool, man. What's a location that you are maybe currently getting, maybe thinking about investigating, or somewhere that you would love to investigate?
Apart from the house I grew up in, that's probably at the top of my list, to be quite fair. But I'd like to do Edinburgh vaults up in Scotland. I've never done them, and I've heard big things. I'd like, if it was possible, just to get rid of the people out of it. I'd like to do the underground in London. Um, I did a pub in London a few years ago. The Grenadier, I think it was called. I'm not 100% what it was called, and it was it's quite famous in town. They've got, the walls are plastered with like old money and stuff, because people leave old money for the spirit to keep it at ease. And the story behind it was literally, this guy made a bad deal and he got killed with a baseball bat, and in the cellar all the cracks in the concrete are still there. And so I'd like to go back there, but without people. I'd like to go there on my own or just with my team, because I like to trust those that I investigate with on a proper level with. So, and you know, you can never be certain on a public event in case somebody's sort of tapping somebody on the shoulder, or, you know, having a crafty fart and making it out to be a noise. You know, I think I'd like to go back to somewhere like that. I'd love to do Stonehenge. You know, go around Stonehenge at night, because
Oh yeah.
that's old kind of magic.
What do
And
you think's
that's,
going on there?
I think it's a big celestial type portal thing, to be quite honest. I think there's something, not only do I think it's amazing how it was built, even if it was built genuinely by, you know, lugging all the stones those hundreds of miles, but I I think it's got more purpose. And I was speaking to a lady a few weeks ago about what I thought with spirit and aliens and interdimensional people, and I think that that's the kind of thing there. And I feel that those that are psychically able and open can relate to more not intergalactical, that was kind of interdimensional beings as well. And this person that I spoke to actually had that view of shadow people, thought that they were interdimensional beings just kind of pushing through the barrier.
That's fascinating. I often wonder that too, about just regular like apparitions and ghosts.
Yeah.
If there's some kind of interdimensional thing where they're kind of bleeding through from a
Yeah.
different, you know, a different space, even space and time, even
Yeah.
like a recording of something that had happened before, that's just kind of bleeding through
Yeah.
into the now.
I think that this sort of thing does happen. I think this sort of thing, there's so much goes on that we just fooey away. Do you know what I mean? And I say that for a skeptical person, no proof is ever going to be enough. You know, they could have, I don't know, if somebody's skeptical about aliens, they could literally have one come to tea with them and they wouldn't believe. You know, if a skeptic sees a ghost, they'll make it up as something else, they're hallucinating, or do you know what I mean? And I think that it's kind of naive to fill off all that sort of stuff.
And I've often also thought of the theory behind, like just the quantum theory that, like that we're always living in the present, and that the present is always like everything's happening at the same time all at once. And
Yeah,
if that is the case, then that, then them moments that in our linear past would still be currently happening right now at the same
yeah,
time, just in a
yeah,
different place, or however
yeah,
you, I don't know. It's hard to kind of wrap your head around, but that's interesting. And then maybe, maybe it's something that we're able to tap into occasionally, or for whatever
yeah,
reason,
yeah.
or
I
somebody
think
like
everything
yourself.
runs on a frequency, doesn't it? You know, everything has a frequency, and different people can tap into different things. It's like there was this little girl. I was called to her house, and they thought that there was a spook in the house because this girl kept seeing things and they were happening, and it was nothing to do with a ghost in the house. It was just this little girl was tapping in to the right frequency to tell what was going to happen. And the mother, she was scared that this one, because this little girl predicted somebody getting cancer and dying, and they got cancer. You know, this woman just thought that the spirit was kind of possessing her in a way, you know, and it was nothing like that. It was just she had that frequency. And I think that we can tap into these things through meditation or self kind of discipline, you know. So the monks that live in Tibet, you know, they wow, you know, the sort of energies they can go through. I just think it's daft to think that people can't see it. Do you know what I mean? But I always find, same in my career, people folly it away. They don't believe it because they're afraid of it. And I think that's the same as that.
That's an interesting point. And I often wonder that about like people that are diagnosed with schizophrenia and stuff
Yeah.
too, if they're not tapping into something that maybe we just can't see,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know.
The brain's not developed enough to kind of make sense of it, so it acts out in certain ways. Yeah, no, I agree. I always think it's like I used to work in a care home, and the people there would literally just sit and talk to nothing, and I'd go in and I'd feel uneasy in the room because I'd be aware of a certain spirit energy. And I think people that have these kind of learning disabilities or mental diseases, mental disabilities, I think that that's just a different state, you know. um, I always find that when I'm anxious or when I'm feeling quite low, I'll get my mind kind of just and I'll pick up on different energies or I'll work differently, and it's just a different frequency again.
Yeah, makes sense to me. Um, Based on your experience with all this, and I tend to ask most my guests this question,
Mhm.
just because it's one that fascinates me, and I love to hear people's different answers. Although a lot of times, it usually points in the same direction. Based on everything you've been through and what you know about death, where do you believe we go after here?
I think that when we pass away, we go to, I'll just say the spirit world, to be quite fair. It's somewhere where we can relax, somewhere where we can heal, somewhere where we can just recoup our own energy, because whether you live 1 year or 100 years, life is traumatic, you know. And I feel that in the spirit world, we can then come back and kind of make ourselves known. We can come back as spirit, you know, we can come back and guide people. But inevitably, I think after we've done guiding and healing and wandering around between our relatives and stuff, I think we'd be that we're reborn. You know, as part of my career, my job, I do past life regressions, and some of the things that people have seen.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure, man. I'm all about that. I'm all about it.
Yeah, for example, one of my past lives, I've not explored it properly, but I was involved in a mutiny on a pirate ship. And the thing
That's
is,
cool.
I love the idea of swimming, but I just can't, you know. And I only learned sort of more recently that a lot of pirates couldn't swim, and I think, oh, okay, is that why? You know, but yeah, I apparently drowned being thrown overboard from the ship, and yeah, it's amazing. One of my friends who I did a regression with knew JFK, and he told me certain things where I don't think he looked it up. I think that he was genuinely under the the trance that it was I'd put him
And
under.
see, that's the thing about past lives. I mean, I don't know. I've been under a couple of times on it, and I've seen people, and I've even helped guide people through some. eh,
Mm-hmm.
I often wonder that, but sometimes it's weird because like you pull these details out of some of
Yeah,
these
yeah,
life stories, and it's like, where did that come from? How did
yeah,
I know that? Or how
yeah,
did they know that?
yeah,
Yeah.
and real obscure details, aren't they? You know, some of these things. So I think it's. Look at it this way: everything kind of recycles in the world. You know, everything kind of what goes around comes around. You know, things just alter and they evolve and they become recycled. So why not the human spirit?
Yeah. And what's odd to me, at least in my experiences too, I was able to pick up feelings and even smells at times,
Yeah,
which is really bizarre.
yeah,
But it's just, I don't know. It makes you wonder, is it real, or is it just your subconscious? I often think that a lot of it could be
It is-
potentially something you're tapping into that you've lived.
but I see. I think spirit communicate through your subconscious. You know, such as when you're just that point before between when you're asleep and awake, and you feel something or you can see things, and I think that is when you're most open, when your subconscious is most open. You know, and I just think that's your amplifier. So that's why we go into more of a relaxed state of mind when we go into meditation, because we need to see that. We need to let that open up.
Yeah, makes sense. So you do regression work then too.
Yes, I love
That's
it.
very cool. And what kind of got you into that? Just
Well, my main spirit guide, Ronnie Yvonne,
oh, so
she's
you are
from
in communication with your spirit guides?
yeah, she's from a past life of mine. I remember when I first communicated with her, she told me how I died, and it was quite a specific way. I was shot outside a church. I think it was about 47 or something like that. I can't exactly remember the year. And I said, okay. So I was writing all this down. I was talking to her, and it was over a Ouija board. And I looked it up on Google. Well, I looked it up on the internet, and boom, it was recorded. So I wanted to know more. You know, I wanted. So yeah, that's how I got into the past life regression side.
Wow, fascinating stuff. All right, so what's your thoughts on aliens then?
So I believe in aliens. I think it's so naive to think that we're the only ones here. I
Mm,
truly do. I think I've seen something flying in the sky that I didn't understand. You know, I'm pretty damn sure I've seen a few things, um, and I think that I don't know. I don't know where I stand on this lizard people type thing, where people think there's still a hollow earth or something. I
right,
don't
right,
know. I do think there are aliens amongst us, and I don't think they're walking around amongst us. You know, I don't think that, but I feel that they are known. But I don't think we're mature enough as a civilization to be interacting with them, because you think how we fight amongst ourselves, let alone if there's little green men walking amongst us. Imagine the racism, the speciesism. You know,
right,
it's.
right,
I think once we get to a point where we can live happily and peacefully, then it'll be easier. And that's what I think. I think in a universe the size of ours, how can we be the only ones? That's
right.
ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. Now, do you believe that when we pass on, I mean, do we always come back as a human, or do we kind of have a choice in kind of what we do when we reincarnate?
I don't think we have a choice, really. I mean, I think it all depends on what we think we believe. You know, if we feel that we believe we've led a good life, we kind of get a little bit more of a better life. But I think that's kind of goes back on what we feel our karma has been. You know, if we feel we deserve live a different experience. I've never, to be quite honest, I've never thought, would we get a choice to come back as an alien or not? You know, I've never thought about that, to be quite fair. But I do feel that we get certain choices, but we make our own choice in that, because it's about what we deem of, you know, I can't imagine some a terrorist leader coming back as a millionaire kind of thing. You know, I think they'd come back as a slug or something, you know, but I think that we'd get a certain choice, yeah.
That's good stuff. And I often wonder too, since I really don't buy into the linear time thing, like other than just for the human experience of linear time. But I often wonder too, then maybe can we pick what time we come back?
As in,
You
what
know,
time of the
of the
of what?
history, yeah, the history of life.
Somebody said something that made me think a little while back, and it was like everything's just replaying, you know. So everybody gets to come back as a certain, you know, all what we're doing now, this has already happened, you know, and it's already going to happen again, and we kind of just swap between each other's lives. And I think in that case, you don't really get to say, right, okay, so I die in 1992. I'm going to come back in 1882. You know, I think that it's almost like you get to choose somebody from that date. I feel that it's just like a long playlist kind of thing. So that's what I believe anyway. I don't think that time is a wibbly wobbly thing, isn't it? You know, it's not something that,
It really is.
you know, it doesn't exist in the spirit world, so it's hard to see. When I give timings or dates like of things to come
Well,
for people that are reading, I always say guidance, because we don't necessarily know that time's right.
you know, another weird one, I don't know if you're familiar with this though, is like, so, you know, past life regression, but people having past life getting regressed and having a parallel life
Hmm.
memory in a
Yeah.
time when they're alive right now. Have you heard of that?
Um, so as in like somebody's living the same life but as a past life. So kind of like deja vu type thing.
Yeah, for example, I know a particular person who is currently living
Right.
that was regressed, and the years that they were pulling on was like in the near future, like in 2024, but they're an adult in that
Yeah.
in them years.
Yeah, that's the kind of premonitions type thing, isn't it? I do believe in that. Yeah, I do believe that you can tap into the future. I truly do. Um, but I think that again, by tapping into that future, you're then changing that future as well, because you're aware of it. You know. So I think that it's a possibility of somebody to do, but I think by that it kind of sends off another wave, like another pathway. So that again, if we were going on the dimensional thing, that then creates a different dimension, you know, from every little thing we do. So, but yeah, I do think we can tap into that future.
Strange stuff, man. Strange
Yeah,
stuff.
oh, absolutely.
I can't get enough of it though, man. I can't get enough of it. Oh, that's great. Can you maybe tell the listeners, you know, where we can find the work that you're doing and like where we can pick your book up?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, one of the easiest ways to get the book is on Amazon. Literally, just type in "The Haunting on Park Road." I've literally just got them both here, but yeah, look for "The Haunting of Park Road." You can buy it just as just the first book, or you can buy the second book, which is the next chapter after Park Road, or you can buy them as a set on Amazon. If you look for me on Facebook, you type in "The Haunting on Park Road" and my name comes up. There's links to my website and things on there as well. So it's Paranormal Chaser, and that's pretty much how you get a hold of me. I love to interact with people. I love to hear people's thoughts and answer questions and just talk. I can talk for England. That's what I've been told. And I like to hear people's experiences, you know, and if anybody needs any help with clearing spirits, then ask, because I can help you out. Um, you know, I love people, you know, I love talking about it, because the paranormal is not spoken about enough.
It's good stuff, and I do recommend it. It's a good read. Check his book out, guys. Follow this guy. He's doing great work. And hey, thanks for taking the time to be on the show.
Oh, it's honestly, it's my pleasure, my friend. It's been lovely to talk to you. I always like minded people. This is what we like.
Absolutely, man.